everybody. Um, Yay, welcome to our final event of our Queer Family Building Conference. I am so excited to be here with all of you, with our amazing panelists. We are going to be doing a session on affirming parenthood for trans and non-binary parents. And we're going to chat. We're going to hear from all these awesome panelists. You're welcome to ask questions in the chat. We're going to have, or please put your questions in the Q&A, and you can connect in the chat. And I will just say right after this, in 1 hour, we'll have like our little conference closing and raffle, and it's going to be very sweet and fun. So, this is just going to be a sweet place to really lift up non-binary and trans parents and parenthood. We need that in our world. And so I'm really honored and excited to do that with you. I'm going to invite each of our amazing panelists to introduce themselves. And please just share a little bit about your family, how you grew your family, and then we will go from there. Erica, do you want to start us off?
Was not expecting that. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm so excited to be here again. Thank you, Maria. This is really beautiful that you've created this space. So um, like so much trauma I'm sorting through to come back to how we got here. Um, my partner and I were in a conversation about getting pregnant for about 5 years. I think that's important to note is that it was not this, okay, let's get pregnant. Okay, I agree, right? And my partner was not for it. He was for the streets. He was like, I don't really know if that I've ever envisioned myself with a kid, right? I see, my community, my nephews, my nibblings, right? Like those are the folks that are the children in my life, but having my own child is not something I ever imagined. And me, when we first met, I was like, once we find sperm, I'm getting pregnant. So it took some time for us to get on the same page about what this would actually look like, where we both were consenting people to that. And I think that's important because so many relationships don't do that, especially in the cishet world, where it's just assumed that everybody wants that. And I think that trickles into queer and trans communities as well, like this assumption that folks will just want to do that, that will be the trajectory. So once we came there was, we're working with a known donor and that did not work out because of their sperm motility for the most part. And that was something that was a learning curve for me because I did not know that that was necessarily a factor. Even as a sex educator, it was a gap for me. Then we went to an unknown donor. That took some time in searching because as two Black people, we were really interested in having a Black donor. And as folks are familiar, there it's really, really challenging to find Black donors. And if they're there, sometimes their vials are super low. So once we did that, then we started, going through the IUI process, and I'm sure we'll get into more of this, but after 3 IUIs, I got pregnant, and it was a ride. It was a journey. It was an experience. Lots of throwing away Teflon pans, moving everything to glass. Yes, Tristan. I was spiraling. I was spiraling. I was like, I must get pregnant, and the environment is impacting my ability to get pregnant. So I'm going to make this home as crunchy and organic as possible so I can have that result. And I feel like it worked. I don't know. Don't listen to me. But that was the journey. I think, Maria, correct me. I'll talk more about preeclampsia and my birth story, but I feel like I've been talking too long. So that's how we get here. But I'll share more.
That's awesome. We'll have lots of time. Thank you, Erica, for sharing. Erin, will you introduce yourself and share about your family?
Yeah, sure. My name is Erin Reed. I'm a transgender journalist, activist. I constantly report on LGBTQ legislation in life. And my family, let's see, I have a son from a previous marriage. I transitioned whenever he was 3 years old. He's 10 years old now. So he's known me more as myself than the person I was before for his entire life. And that's something relatively common whenever it comes to transgender parents. Prior to about 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, it was extremely hard to obtain gender affirming care. There were a lot of gatekeepers, a lot of different obstacles to doing so, and also transgender identity was not as accepted back then as it tends to be now. And so, as a result, many transgender people come into their transition with a kid already. And I have to say that, whenever I first transitioned, there were so many people who told me that it would be harmful for him and that, how is he going to take it? How is he going to handle it? But let me tell you something. My biggest supporter was my kid. I think that all of the people that said that transition would be confusing for him, they were often the ones that were the most confused. My son never missed a beat. And I think that part of that is that kids don't have that ingrained sort of bigotry that some people develop over the course of their lives. They don't know to hate. That's not something that comes naturally. And I think that that's one of the biggest great positive things about being human is to know that that is our natural state, is not to hate, is not to want to discriminate, is not to, you know, try to throw, negative emotions onto being trans, but rather acceptance. That is the natural state of being human. And that's what I've seen from him. Ever since then, we've grown together as a family. And then about 3.5 years ago, Zoe, Representative Zoe Zephyr, for those of you who know her, she's the first trans rep of Montana. We entered into a relationship and then we got married, and she's become just as big of a part of our family. And it's just been a very wonderful, just sort of pathway for us all. We love our family. I say it every night how much I love my family to them. So
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much for sharing and being here. Ro, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ro Tamayo, and I'm so happy to be here. I am a queer trans solo parent by choice, and I've been part of the Pregnant Together community since its inception. So I've had a chance to connect with so many of you there, and just wonderful to be here with everyone today. I have been a midwife for 17 years, so I've been in like birth, pregnancy, fertility, postpartum world for a very long time. And I think for myself, I began exploring the solo parenthood journey around 7 years ago. I've always wanted kids. It was like always in my plan much earlier in my life. Like I'm about to be 42, and um, yeah, I think that it kind of gradually transitioned to more of like a solo journey, which has been wonderful. And I started, let's see, lost track of the years now. My kiddos just turned 2, and I started talking with a potential known donor, and that lasted for several months and ended up not being the route for us. And at the end of that, I was like, I'm ready to move forward now. And so I moved to an unknown donor. And I got pregnant on my first IUI and had an early loss, and then got pregnant on my second IUI. Um, and I know Maria likes to share this. I'll share it here also. Because of like my history and my work, I actually did my own IUI. So it was like a really interesting experience. The first one was very magical, and the second one was very rushed and chaotic. And that brought my kiddo to me. So, I always like to tell people everything doesn't have to fall together exactly right. It doesn't have to have all the emotions and the feel and have like perfection across the board for it to work. So yeah, that's a little bit of my journey.
Thanks, Ro. I know I'm always just so impressed that you were able to do that. Yeah, it is the most badass thing. Jessica shared it was the most badass thing they've ever heard. Tristan, welcome.
I don't know how I'm gonna follow knocking yourself up, but I'll try. I did not knock myself up, but I'm Tristan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm joining you from Portland, Oregon, and I became a parent overnight to my partner's niece and nephew. So 1 year into our relationship, we got a phone call that his sister's kids needed a place to stay and could they come and stay with us? So carrying on the grand tradition of queer and trans people, we cleaned up the mess that straight people made, and those kids have failed to leave our family. It has now been, I'm saying that because my daughter's downstairs and she thinks it's very funny when I make 14 years. Yeah, so we've been parenting them for 14 years. We adopted them, I think, 5 years into that process. And as the adoption became final, I voiced to my partner that I had been having literal dreams, not like fantasies or imaginings, but literal at night dreams of a child that wanted to be born to us since very early on in our relationship. And so once the dust settled on our adoption, I came to my partner and said, "Would you ever consider us having a biological child? I'm a transgender man, and I have never had bottom surgery, so I've retained all of the anatomical parts required to be able to conceive and carry a child. And my partner is non-binary, but uses he, him pronouns and is assigned male at birth. And so between the two of us, we could DIY it the old-fashioned way, whatever that means. And so I said, want to have a baby with me?" And my partner was like, "No, and this is a terrible idea. Maybe your worst," which is saying a lot because I've had a lot of really bad ideas. But over time and with full consent, I really love what Erica said, when they mentioned how important it is that both people are really like on board. And I didn't want to do it halfway or in a coercive way. So I just waited. And eventually he came around and was like, "Okay, yes, I took us on this wild adventure with my family and adopting these two kids. If this is the adventure that you feel called for us to go on, then like let's do it." And so I stopped my testosterone, um, and did all the things we had already been doing. And I did also had an early pregnancy loss before I even knew that I was fertile because I didn't even have a first menstrual cycle. Apparently, I slept through seventh grade biology and I forgot that ovulation comes before menstruation. So I had assumed I wasn't fertile because I hadn't had a period yet, but I was, and I did. But that was an early loss. And then, a few months later, I conceived and carried our son, the fetus that became our son, Leo, who is now 8 years old. And this is a big part of the work that I do is helping other folks demystify some of the fertility pieces. And I'm so glad that Pregnant Together exists. So now I can really focus on working with providers so that they know how to understand, support, and welcome us when we come through their doors, because there's a lot that they don't know.
So awesome. Thank you, Tristan. We have a lot of providers here, but most of them are like already very familiar, and it's been really great to see everyone showing up for queer family building. And I want to ask each of you what you love about being a trans or non-binary parent, like how you feel that you bring that part of yourself into your parenting, and what that gives you and your family. And we'll start with you, Ro.
Now I know how you felt, Erica. Yeah, I think for me, this has been the most creative journey of my life. And I like there's so many parts that are exhausting and are mundane, and it's just like get food on the table and schedules and preschool and my work, like all the things. And it's consistently every day. I'm like surprised at the ways that I'm like creatively showing up, and that parenting, especially just like an active toddler, like demands that in a way. And I feel like as a trans person, I'm used to thinking outside of the box and I'm used to thinking outside of the binary. And for me, I think becoming a parent and being in this place of like constant creativity, um, and just like imagination, like the opportunity to like witness this young mind and like an opportunity to let myself go there as well has, I think, brought out like my transness and my own identity in a new way, that just, yeah, it's just I see it like in more like multidimensional, in ways that I didn't before. And I am reading How We Show Up by Mia Birdsong, and there's a quote in there from Brandon Wint, and it really struck me just in relation to parenting. Not queer like gay, queer like escaping definition, queer like some sort of fluidity and limitlessness all at once, queer like a freedom too strange to be conquered, queer like the fearlessness to imagine what love can look like and to pursue it. And I feel like that for me is just like it's so much of the journey. And I feel like, um, yeah, like there's just so many opportunities to show up in new ways, in creative ways, and not be bound by what has been defined before me, and just an opportunity to learn and experience from other parents and folks in community, both like intimate community and the broader community. Um, and it gives me a lot of hope, in the midst of everything that's going on these days. So
Thanks, bro. Beautiful. Erin, what do you love about being a trans parent?
Yeah, my son is 10 years old right now, and Zoe and I, we often talk about what does it mean to raise a young man in this day and age, in this political day and age, in this cultural day and age? How do we raise somebody to express their own masculinity healthily? And one thing that I've noticed and just been just aware of is that our son is growing up with such a healthy approach to gender and such a healthy approach to like developing his own version of masculinity that isn't, dictated by a parent or dictated by his peers. He is one of the kindest, most self-confident kids in his class. He stands up for other people. He is confident. And I like to think that growing up in our family, which, he knows is a different kind of family, has been a positive for him. It's helped him question things. It's helped him approach things differently than I think maybe kids who come from a more traditional family sometimes get taught to approach things. And I mean, we're so proud of him. We're so proud of him every single day. He stands up for the people that are less fortunate. He is loved by his peers. He is kind to everybody, and that's what we want. That's exactly what I think anybody who's raising a kid wants.
Sweet. How about you, Erica?
I have a little over 2.5-year-old that's going on 21, it seems. The fight for autonomy is just so tender to witness, and really has me thinking about how many times I was also fighting for autonomy but wasn't able to have it, was shut down, was told not to be in my body, whether it be not to cry or to not emote at all, right? Or just suck it up and keep going, or don't wear that, wear this. And being able to honor that for my first time consensual parenting, because I think that's also important to note, is that I've parented my siblings, I've parented exes, right? All non-consensually. So this is my first time as a consensual parent. So really being with a tantrum in a way that's like, oh, there's a need that's not met, not coming from a place of, oh, they need to stop, or this needs to be interrupted, or we need to keep going, or whatever, as a representation of my own expression of who I am as a queer person, right? Like I literally exist due to pushing up against everything that says that we should not exist. I exist in opposition to folks saying that our bodies do not belong to ourselves. So constantly honoring that for a 21-year-old who's actually 2.5, right? Like that is healing my inner child, but also is teaching me how to honor so much more. I think even in honoring like plant life, and it's you learn so much as a parent anyway, but then also as a queer parent, a non-binary parent, a trans parent, you really have to sit with yourself in what you are, how you are showing up, right? And as Ro read that beautiful quote about queerness, queerness is so much more, like as Bell Hooks says, than who we're fucking, right? It is, how we push up against the state. It's how we show up in community. And I think that plays a big role in how I parent as well.
Mm, thank you. Tristan, what do you love about being a trans parent?
Yeah, not much I can add on top of, what everybody else has shared. I think the thing that comes to mind is even when I accidentally slip into more heteronormative ways of doing things, which I find it's hard for me not to. The siren song is real. And the example that I'll give is you have a 15-year-old daughter, and we went out to dinner the other night, and I was like, kiddo, you're like you're pretty late to class most days. And I'm wondering like what can I do to support you in getting to school on time? And she looks at me and she goes, "No, we're not doing that." And it was like it was just so funny to me that I'm here trying to impose this like normative idea that like you should be in school at this arbitrary time, even though you're doing very well grade-wise and like you're not getting in trouble. So, like, who gives a shit when you get to school, right? If you're doing well, you're participating in class, you're getting good grades, like, who cares? Why am I'm just like, I slip into this rigidity around the way that things are supposed to be. And so it's really wonderful to see my own queerness and my own transness reflected back to me. And when my kids are like, "Why? No, we're not going to do it that way." Why? Just because that's what you're supposed to do. I'm supposed to be at school. Why? If my grades aren't suffering, I'm doing well socially, I'm not getting in trouble, I'm not like vaping in the park. Like, who cares when I get to school? So that's something that's very rewarding is even when I slip back into the way that things are supposed to be, my kids from age 8 to 17 will be like, that's stupid. Like, why would we do it that way? And so they'll challenge me, which is, it's just I love being challenged as well, So it wasn't a tense situation that I was like, right, why do we have to do that? I'm sorry, like let's do something else instead. What can we do? So that's really fun and rewarding is to not feel constrained by how things are supposed to be and to be able to do what works for us instead of what a parent is supposed to do on paper.
Mm, yes, thank you. Um, I want to ask, and I know Erin, you already kind of spoke to this, but like how do you conceptualize gender in raising your kids? How does that influence your parenting? And I know we will get into the questions that people are asking. Please continue adding them in the Q&A. But we also, if it aligns, we had a question about favorite children's books that celebrate trans folks and trans parents. So like gender, parenting, resources around you that are supportive. And yeah, feel free, Ro, to start us off there if you want.
Yeah, I think, I guess just continuing on what I was sharing earlier, I think that that extends to gender. And I've found, yes, there's so much messaging and there's so much of like heteronormativity that is built in. And so there's like an undoing of that. And also, I've found that it comes pretty natural to me just to like, we talk about bodies and we just talk about bodies for what they are. And like I think to the point of like books, I I just like queer every book that we're reading, It's just like these are people, these are bodies, these are like I adjust books that we're reading if they don't feel like they really align. And I think just there's such an opportunity to to the best of our ability, like start these kiddos off without So many of the things, like for myself personally, of like so many of the things that I've had to deconstruct and like relearn. And I just like leaning into that, being able to offer something different. And it's what gives me motivation on the days that it feels harder, or on days where I feel like, man, I really fucked up on this, or I don't like how I responded that way, or I don't like how I responded to another person in regard to my child's gender. We use they them pronoun. I have they them pronouns, and then for my child, also using they them pronouns for now. And we've been starting to have conversations. And they told me the other day, I was like, do you want to be referred to as he or she or they, like if we're talking about you? And they thought about it for a while, and they were like, they, and went on playing, and so just like the opportunity to build that in and have it be expansive from the beginning.
Beautiful. We've got lots of questions about this in particular. So if anyone else wants to speak to it, yeah, unmute and go ahead.
Sure. My 8-year-old is very gender nonconforming. My elder two kids are like radically conformist in terms of their gender expression and identity. But my 8-year-old, and the thing that I really thought about with him is he started really age 4 or 5, like he wanted to wear dresses. And he would say over and over again, I'm a boy who likes dresses and dolls and those kinds of things. And so I think for us, it was almost the other side of that, which is really for me, I thought about it as consent. I thought, like, I want him to be really consenting to what this means socially for him so that he knows he is making a choice, and the choice that he is making may mean that kids will ask him over and over and over again if he's a boy or a girl, is that really what he is consenting to do? And that's pretty countercultural in our like queer and trans spaces, where a lot of people are like already defaulting to they them, and that's we made a different choice. But I wanted to make sure, because I have seen some other kids of queer and trans parents kind of get thrown into the deep end, not realizing that what happens in their family unit is quite different than what happens in school. And so just having those conversations with him, that's like, of course you can wear that. And if someone says something to you about it, like, let's practice what you might say. What might you say? How might you react or respond? If you don't like the way that they respond, like, who can you go to for help? Just so he always knows it is a choice he's making. Also, we've had to coach him around, like, he'll get very mad at the grocery store if someone is like, oh, and does this little girl want a sticker? And he'll be like, do I look like a girl? And he has long hair and he's wearing a dress and he has nail polish on. And so it is like, do we wish we lived in a world where people didn't assume? Of course we do. Do we live in this one? Of course we do. And helping him start to develop the tools to kind of accept and understand where we are, and also like be as liberated as possible, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. We are getting so many questions, which I love. And I know that we could spend like 5 hours in this panel. So I'm going to read, I guess there's a theme that I'm noticing about navigating extended family, and like how you navigate relationships with extended family and your children around gender and around emotional safety. And if anyone wants to speak to that, I invite you.
I'm happy to speak to that. I'm gonna combine institutions in that too. Like, my kid is in daycare, and we've told them East pronouns, and that for now we use they, he, or he, they pronouns. And there will be little activities that they do that we see over the little monitor thing where they'll put a boy and a girl together to dance, right? Or they'll do like these super gendered things, and we just send messages like, please, please don't do that, right? Like, please. Like, we've got to be probably the most annoying parents, because we just found out the other day that they're doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes, the Pledge of Allegiance in daycare. So absolutely not. So we told them, you got to take East out of the room for that. We don't actually want East memorizing that or reciting it. Me, as somebody who's been so removed from secondary school for a very long time, I still know it by heart. Like this is truly horrible indoctrination. So constantly reiterating, talking to family members can be a massive, massive headache, and super challenging. And sometimes it looks like not being around those family members too. And I think as queer and trans people, I think sometimes we think that we have to be super all like open arms to everyone and just affirming, and even if they're horrible in our direction, we just have to accept it. And I just do not believe that, right? I just think that boundaries need to be set, and if folks are not going to honor how we parent or how we even see ourselves and how our kids sees themselves, then it's just a no pass in being with them. But there's been lots of essentially gender workshops with our family, and making sure that they affirm our kids in their bodies, that they don't ask questions like, do you have a girlfriend or do you have a boyfriend? Like even around consent, like, hey, go kiss your grandpa or go kiss grandma or TT or hug. Like we try to be super mindful so that young people, our kid, but also young people in general, understand that their bodies belong to themselves. That's why so many of us grow up, regardless of identity, having a really hard time with saying no, right? And because we were taught that it's just nicer if you just agree. And I really don't. I want to raise a kid that is it really refusing, right? I want to be responsible for his refusal in life in so many various ways. So that's what we do. It's not perfect. It's challenging. Sometimes we scream into the void, but those are the things that we've been doing.
Thanks, Erica. Do you want to speak to this at all, Erin?
Absolutely. So, family can be very hard for queer people, especially extended family, and mine has certainly been no exception to that. I come from a very conservative family in South Louisiana, and uh, my dad, has yet to accept who I am 7 years later. My mom, though she passed away last year, did come to a place of acceptance before her passing, which was very sweet and very wonderful and meant a lot to me. Um, and so when it comes to my son, it's definitely a sort of tenuous situation, sort of difficult at times, because it's like, on one hand, my son loves my grandpa, or my son loves his grandpa, my son loves my dad. On the other hand, I know that my dad is not a great influence whenever it comes to LGBTQ people, whenever it comes to queer people, whenever it comes to any form of difference. And so I've had to set boundaries. I've had to, you know, I've allowed him to maintain a presence in my son's life, but also I've made very clear certain things that can't be transgressed. And I've had to pull back at times because of that. And my hope has always been, and I think it's happening now as he gets older, is that as my son grows up, he recognizes, some of the harmful things that unfortunately his grandpa has been a part of, and my son is questioning those things now. The other thing that I'll say is that in so many of our situations where we don't have affirming families, or where we don't have families that are very good on these kinds of things, um, we make our own families. That's a big reason why many of us are here in this chat here, is that we have all made our own families. We've all created the thing that we wish we could have had. And my son is getting what I wish I could have had, a family that will accept him no matter who he is, a family that loves one another no matter who they are. And my son, myself, Zoe, we've formed an amazing family. And then you also bring in other people to your family, people who come from other parts of your life. And we've done that. We've had people from our community. We've had people who are close to us who have become our family. And that's part of, I think, the magical joy of being queer, is that we learn how to transgress those boundaries. We learn how to create family in ways that others perhaps didn't think were possible.
Awesome. This has been touched on, but we have a question around like advocating for trans kids, or and supporting your kids in navigating the heteronormative world um, to support your trans identity, your family, like kind of what are you doing to help your children kind of normalize your family and advocate for themselves in the world? Erica, do you wanna?
I can add just a little bit. I love that people are putting book recommendations in the chat. That is, I think, super helpful. And then also what Aaron said was such a word in that we have created our own family units that are chosen family. And a lot, I don't think, I think I might have one hetero friend. So most of my friends are Black, queer, and trans. So that is who East is seeing on a regular basis, right? So I think that also is helpful, is like being in and around queer and trans people, and not separating young people from them. And I know in our community we also have internalized homophobia and transphobia and think that kids should not be around queer and trans people or whatever harmful views like that. And I just think that that adds to the detriment if it's like this secret that you don't really talk about, right? I think also just being transparent with them and letting them know and protecting them when things happen in school and talking to administration. What is the school's policy on queer and trans young people? How do they handle situations around queer phobia and transphobia? Right? Asking those questions ahead of time, I think really supports young people for sure.
Thank you. Anyone want to add to that?
I'll just add one small bit that ties into family and institution also. I think from the beginning, just trying to let my child like see me advocate or like how I respond. And I feel like I had like a gradual build up to it. Like there were a lot of like practice opportunities when they were younger, and now they're at an age where they're like noticing and they're responding and they're repeating things that are happening. And I have a family member who has been very not supportive. And I told them, before my child was born, actually when they were first born, um, I said, well, you've got a couple years to get your shit together because as soon as they start saying their own pronouns, like there's not going to be any wiggle room around this, and I'm going to advocate hard for them. So you've got a little bit of time to adjust. And I think, that goes to advocating in medical spaces and in preschool and at the grocery store and kind of picking and choosing those battles. But um, yeah, leading the way with just, advocating for them. And I think as they get a little bit older, there will be a lot more of that advocating on their terms. Like right now, it's been on my terms and kind of like figuring out like what I can do preemptively. And I think we're transitioning into a time where it will be led by them, and just want to be a support for them.
Mm.
I want to jump in here real quick. I think part of that is like as they get older, they can advocate as well, and like that's a big deal for them. My son, he turned 9, and uh, in elementary school they started using the word gay as a slur. Like that was a thing that came up again. This happens like today in this day and age. It happens in elementary schools, even in very progressive places. And my son, like, I think single-handedly stopped it in his class. He went up to each person that said it and said, "My moms are gay. You want to tell that to my face? Like, you want to say that?" And they stopped. Like he ended that at his school. And I think that that's one of the really great things about being queer parents is that we have kids that may be queer, may not be queer, but they will go into their community knowing that they love somebody who is queer, that their parents, they were raised by somebody who is queer. And I think that helps change the world. It really does. It helps change hearts and minds as other people who get to know my son and as other people who get to know your own kids realize that like I can be friends with somebody and I like this person, and oh, their parents are the people that maybe my parents are uncomfortable with, but I love this kid. I love this person. And their parents seem okay to me. That's how you change hearts and minds.
Beautiful. Yes, so many amazing book recommendations in the chat. Check that out. We had a question on um, how parenting ties into abolition for you as part of a practice of building and nurturing new worlds. Do you want to speak to that, Erica?
Yeah, sure. That's a big question. I think being someone that is a survivor of parents who only understood punishment in a carceral way, it has been a big unlearning for me to not do the same, repeat the same pattern, right? And connecting that to a practice of abolition has been really important. Like, no, your child does not need to be hit, right? Like that is never normalized. And I think for us, that has been a challenging conversation that we've had with family members, right? And saying like, you absolutely will not hit our child, right? That is not a recourse. Because when we were kids, if we were being watched by grandma, she could do that, right? So it's like reprogramming everybody to understand that's not how we're doing this, but also yelling too, right? Like really finding ways not to raise our voice at our child, right? When we also have emotions, we also are sorting through our own nervous system, so finding ways to really calm our nervous system so that we can interact with our child's nervous system and honor their nervous system as well. So that has been really important to like connect to, honoring our kids' autonomy. It's such a beautiful question. I feel like I can sit with this or keep talking for much longer, but those are just a few things that come to mind. Just moving away from the carceral state in terms of how we interact with our kid.
Is it okay if I jump in too? Okay,
Go.
great.
Yeah.
I founded a nonprofit called Beyond These Walls, which supports people, queer and trans people who are currently and formerly incarcerated. And so this is a big conversation in our house. It's a big part of our framework for parenting as well. I will just plant the seed for folks, so to speak, that it gets very challenging, particularly ages 4 to 6, because in terms of young people's developing minds, that's typically the time when they think in very black and white ways. So I get a lot of DMs on social media from parents who are like, my kid won't stop playing like cops and robbers or putting their friend in jail or talking about good guys and bad guys or saying that only girls have long hair. And so that's, I think the thing I want to say is like, you're not doing anything wrong. It's like natural, it's normal, it's just how the brain works. And the more you push back, which I think is in itself a carceral way of thinking, that there is a right way, which is my way, and there's a wrong way, which is you, the kid's way, the more that you're able to just be like gentle and supportive and like, well, I don't think that's true. Remember, your friend Liam has long hair, right? Just like gentle, age appropriate ways of having a conversation and not that's bad, that part has been very challenging as my kids have gotten older, but they really do outgrow it. And they really do get to a place where they are like, oh, right, there's not good people and bad people. There's like different choices that people make, which are impacted by a lot of other things. And no one thing that anybody ever does or says means that they're not worthy of being in community with us. And so that's been a big part for us as well in our conversations with our kids.
Mm. Ro, do you want to speak to that at all?
I don't have a ton to add to what's already been shared, but I think um, in the retraining and like relearning for myself, like modeling that and modeling when I mess up or I make a mistake, like being really transparent in those conversations, age appropriate for a 2-year-old, but um, yeah, I think that that is a big part of it for me and like how we interact with the world. I talk about what we see when we're out and about. I talk about things that are happening in the world with them. And Yeah, just trying to give a place of perspective for them, build it in again to Tristan's point of there's not like one right, one wrong way of doing or seeing things, but being able to create a safe foundation for those conversations to happen.
We're going to switch gears a little. I just want to make sure that we answer as many of these questions as we can. How did you all build support for yourselves? How do you build support for yourselves as trans and non-binary parents? And then also, this is sort of a jump, but it makes sense in my brain that we had a question on like, how do you navigate a child putting you in greater contact with like the straight cis parents in their lives, which is something that I'm currently like, oh yeah, all these play dates are kind of intense. Um, so that's kind of the general prompt for this go around. Erin, do you want to start?
Yeah, these are really really good questions. And yes, like I interact with the straight cisgender heterosexual world quite often because I go to the PTA meetings, I go to trick or treat with my son, and this is just a part of our lives. And I tend to find that, I've always been somebody who I think can communicate well with other people, even in spite of like the differences that we might have. And I think that my life has been enriched by some of the cisgender heterosexual other parents in the world that I'm friends with, and their lives have been enriched by my presence as well, I'd like to think. And you know, sometimes people can ask questions and have thoughts and all those fun things that we get sometimes from the world around us. But I tend to be a fairly open person, and like I help people come to a place of understanding, and it helps a lot, I think. And I think that the big thing that I always try to put out there with whenever I'm interacting with the straight cisgender heterosexual parenting world is that I'm a parent too. I've got the same hopes and dreams for my kid that you have for yours. I, love to see my son's successes, and I I talk him through his failures just like you do with your kids. And I think that the more people see that while we may be different in how, we approach the world and in how we envision ourselves in relation to the world, there are so many things about us that are so similar and that are so the same. And I don't know. I think that that helps move the needle a little bit. My wife often talks about like what moving the needle looks like for helping people accept who we are in this day and age where we're fighting political battle after political battle for her right to exist. And that means something different for each and every person. It might mean to my dad using my name once, who, he's never truly accepted me. But if he uses my name once, then that moves the needle in a small way, in a tiny way. For my mom, it meant, somebody who ended up working with her in her office was somebody who was trans and who followed my work and who talked me up to her and suddenly helped her realize that, like, oh, she's got a daughter who people love and who she can love too. And I want to say that like that's part of the work, and nobody individually should feel forced to do that work, but collectively it's part of the work that we have to do. And it's part of the work that I try to do when I can.
Beautiful. Thank you. I feel that parenting is like the most hopeful work that we can do. It makes us engage in the world and the future and our communities in a way that um I don't know. I mean, I know some people do without children, but I think there's like this unique opportunity that it can give us that can actually be really healing.
I think it's also so specifically shaped by where you live. I mean, living in Portland, it's real. It is like a practically a liberal enclave here in terms of my son doesn't get bullied at school for having long hair. When we see other families, no one's ever like, where's the mom? Does she die? Which used to happen to us in Brooklyn when we lived in New York all the time to our big kids. And so I think there is a real privilege that I want to name to living in a place where there are people who have blazed the trail before you and where people have gone because they want to be in communities where they're with their kids go to school with kids who are not like them. Or when my trans pregnancy story went public, the mom across the street like sent a note home with her kid that said, thanks so much for doing this because it's been a chance to talk to my sons about all the different ways families can show up. And so I think there really is not just an obligation, to Erin's point, but also kind of a joy and giving people a chance to do the right thing. Or coming out to a mom at school where she's like, wait, how did Leo come in your lives? And I was like, oh, I gave birth to him. And she was like, oh, thank God. Now we can talk shit about pregnancy together. And I was like, yes, we can. So sometimes people will be surprising in a positive way. And there might be allies where I didn't expect, for sure.
Mm. We only have 9 more minutes, which is wild how quickly time has flown. We had a question about how your kids refer to you. And then, so what I think we should do is just do kind of one last go around. Something that we do often in our Pregnant Together support groups is a rose and a thorn. So like a rose and a thorn about this moment in parenting. So like something that's going well and something that's challenging as a trans or non-binary parent at this moment in time. And then if you could also share how what your children refer to you as in that go around, that would be awesome. Ro, do you want to go first? I keep calling on you first? I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I was trying to think of what my rose and thorn are. Um, yeah, I think one thing that is going well right now is slowing down in the midst of chaos. I am working directly in like food justice work, and I'm working with SNAP right now. And the past couple weeks have just been really, really intense. And so, like, taking opportunities, even when things are not going according to schedule, we're out of our routine, and just finding those opportunities and being like, I am going to be 100% present for the time that we have right now. And I think that that is going really well. Um, I think a thorn right now for me, speaking to the question about being a solo parent, is just questioning what I'm doing, and like sometimes like feeling like, oh, like would I be able to show up differently or more if there were more adults in this home? And knowing that that's not what I've chosen, and yeah, just trying to balance all of that. My parent name is Baba, and my child calls me Abba. So my parent name is Abba. We're just in that season, so we'll see whatever they decide.
Thanks, Ro. I will also put a plug for our resource bundle. We have a whole list of non-binary parent names that have been crowdsourced by community, and that's a really sweet thing to check out. Tristan, you want to share a rose and thorn and your parent name?
Yeah, I already shared my rose is when my kids correct me when I'm trying to be too, mainstream in my parenting. A thorn, actually, I appreciate the question about, thinking about abolition. I think the thorn for me is that there's such a calling, particularly from the left and in queer and trans communities where I live, to polarize and to dehuman, belittle, degrade people that we don't agree with politically. And so I think it's really challenging for my kids of all ages to try to model for them, yeah, like we disagree and what they're doing is causing harm. And that's not a garbage person. They're like, that's still not someone, that's not a bad guy. And it's like, I can feel myself wanting to categorize people as that. And so it is really challenging to keep modeling for them that, like, no, 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 I don't just mean there's no good guys and bad guys in prison where we have friends and where I do work. I literally mean it like on the TV. I literally mean it like in the White House. I mean it like all the time in all the ways. We can disagree, and that doesn't mean that we're going to say that any one person, like anything bad should happen to them, for example. And that is really putting me to the test right now to do that. So that's a thorn. And I'm daddy and my partner is dada.
Thanks, Tristan. How about you, Erin?
Yeah, I think for me, the thorn is the fact that my son knows what I do. My son knows the work that I do and knows that this is a hard time for people like me and for families like his. And, I don't hide the world from him. I explain it to him in ways that he can understand, but I definitely don't hide the world from him. And he sees the difficulty that sometimes, I face, or that sometimes the people that he loves face, not just trans people, but his best friend is an immigrant, for instance, and we've got ICE raids, every single day. And so he sees this world that I know, has got to be tough for him to see. But I think that the rose is that he has two parents, myself and Zoe, who try to model every day that as hard as the world is, you can still work every day to make it a better place. And he sees the ways that we try to do that. And I see the ways that he tries to do that. And he's surprising us every single day. And I like to think that as queer parents, we all are raising kids that will challenge the world and make it a better place by virtue of the families that they've been raised in and that they've been taught to love.
Thank you. Did you share what your son calls you and your wife?
Oh yeah, yeah. Son calls me mom, calls my wife Zoe a stepmom, and yeah, that's it's been pretty straightforward. I actually something interesting about this. Whenever I transitioned and he was 3, I did not want to tell him what to call me. I wanted him to sort of, if he wanted to continue calling me what he called me before, he could. If he wanted to change, he could. I wanted to leave it up to him entirely. And I remember it was about 2 months into my transition. This is so long ago, but it was about 2 months into my transition. He was walking upstairs, 3 years old, and he was like, "Good night." And he just paused. He's like, "Mom," and he just gave me this big smile, and I was like, "Oh, my heart melted." And he's never stopped since then. It just kind of came naturally to him.
So sweet. Thank you for sharing that beautiful story. All right, Erica.
Oh, these are so beautiful. I'm like, what is my rose and my thorn? I mean, my child is going through some sort of growth spurt and has been up every night at about 4 in the morning, just up yelling dada, who he calls my partner. And that means that dada needs to get up, not mama, me. Because he called you. He said dada. So I would say that's a thorn right now. That's really challenging because it's like, okay, how do we keep sleep going? Right? Like I know that's not super consistent with like being queer and trans, but hey, it's the thorn. And then a rose is the speech development, like seeing the things that he says. Like this morning I said, East Mondani won New York City mayor, right? Mondani won. And he's like, go Mondani. So the language, like expressing, himself is just really, really beautiful to witness. Like, how queer is it that literally birth is so queer? Like, where did you come from? And then now you're here saying words. Like, I just don't understand. It is just the coolest thing ever to witness. And I'm honored to be that kid's parent. And yeah.
Thank you, Erica. I'll just share since we have a minute and a half, that I didn't identify as non-binary when I first became a parent, and it was about 3 years ago that my non-binariness started growing. So I started as mommy, and then it's been fun to see how the kids have just evolved. They started calling me Mappa randomly, which I love. And then like now they're experimenting with calling me dad, and I co-parent my children with they have another mom, and I love seeing how it evolves with them. And I think that's something that like we really get to experience with our kids. And I know I work with so many people that are wondering how it's going to be, all of these things. And I think many of you have spoken to just how it continues to evolve, and we learn from our kids and they learn from us. And it's a really awesome experience, and I'm so grateful to share this space with all of you. Thank you, Erica, Ro, Erin, and Tristan, for being here with us. Thank you, everyone, for attending.